I'm Eva Oh, and this is the Teakink podcast. I've been a dominatrix since 2011, and I would like to spill the tea on my life. Thank you for listening. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to another episode of Teakink, where I have Black Venus with me.
And I have some tea.
AKA Venus, and tea on my very practical torture chair side table. But I need to get a side table. Sorry about that.
No, I like that. I think it's very appropriate.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And how have you been? How have the parties been? Actually, the story of how we met. I was with Miss Gold, who sent me a text saying I needed to come to this party. Dalston, okay, yes. Didn't really know what I was walking into. And I walk up these stairs. I pay for my ticket. I walk into this room just flooded with humans of all wondrous beings. And there's reggaeton playing. And I realize that I don't see a single man in sight. And I am so used to seeing that kind of direction of sound with a lot of heavy mask sort of energy in the room. And I was very, very pleased.
Yeah, I think that's actually maybe one of the things that makes Sex and Rage stand out is the music. I think a lot of times we go to kink parties, like sexy events, and we expect a particular kind of music. And I think that's maybe what negates a certain demographic of people from attending. I think music is so essential to like how we feel about ourselves, our sensualities, our cultures. It's all very intertwined, and it's how people feel represented. So it was really important for us to kind of bring in the sounds of, that the Afro-Caribbean, Afro-diaspora. And I think that's some of the feedback that we get is that this is, the space is kind of curated around the music and the culture. And that's what makes people feel comfortable to be there.
And how did it come about?
So Sex and Rage has been in existence for about 5 years now. So we started in 2019. But we started doing very focused on festivals, workshops, embodied education. That's kind of our ethos, resisting stigma and shame through sex education.
So you created a festival or you became a part of different festivals?
We curated a festival. So in 2019, we were given a space in kind, me and another project that I was working on at the time. And Sex and Rage had kind of started with me and my ex, both romantically and also ex-business partner. We founded Sex and Rage together. And it was originally meant to be a conversation between sex workers and non-sex workers. So creating a space where that kind of dialogue could be facilitated. And it was really important for me that conversation wasn't always a kind of verbal one. It was one that was felt and experienced through different kinds of activities, different kinds of play. Because I think that's when we're most receptive, is when we're not necessarily, it's a bad thing to intellectualize certain kinds of advocacy, but I think people are most receptive when they feel relaxed, when they feel comfortable around each other. So that was where it started. We had meditation workshops, bondage workshops, conversations on the history of sex work to really contextualize what we were doing, kinky wrestling, and some film screenings and readings. So it was a very eclectic beginning, very creative, very curatorial. Then when the pandemic happened, and that's a whole other story. But on the other side of that, venues were closing. We wanted to create a space that was about partying and celebrating ourselves as lesbians and bisexuals, including trans-mass people and people who identify as lesbian or bisexual. So we'd seen this documentary called Shakedown by Layla Weinrab, and it's an incredible film about this strip club in LA in the early noughties. And that was kind of the inspiration for the strip club. There are so few lesbian bars in the UK. There are so few lesbian and bisexual centered nights. You know, there's a lot of queer nights, but I think sometimes lesbian and bisexual communities can get kind of disenfranchised in those spaces. So this was about celebrating our sexuality and our music, our culture, in a way that was inclusive and vibrant and accessible to people as well. It's a space where people can kind of go and, you know, we have a lot of people saying, oh, I've came alone, and they're really comfortable to do that. So, yeah, that was kind of the impetus behind starting the strip club.
I'm not really sure what it is, but it feels like a house party.
It does have that energy.
Yeah, it's raucous, but in a very comfortable way.
Yeah, everyone says it's really sexy, but really wholesome.
Yeah. How? So how does the night actually progress? Like when I got there, there was already performances. You were all surrounded. Is there a format to the evening or?
Yeah, it's always been about creating an immersive feeling. So I'd actually say Sex and Rage is about creating immersive experiences. Very often there's like this separation between the audience and the performer, which is nice in a lot of ways because, you know, you go, you get your ticket, you're coming to see a show. That's great. But in order to this feels like kind of like breaking down that wall. So we have the audience the performances happen quite spontaneously often. We have set performances. We have a poll, but we also have a floor show. And it just kind of creates this really nice flow so people can walk around the space, which is Earth Hackney. People kind of walk around the venue and really feel like they're part of the vibe, which I think is why it gives it that really intimate feel, because people are creating with us.
And you dance at it?
Yes, I dance at it. Egotistical. I'm going to dance at my own show.
Did you dance before you had Sex and Rage?
Yeah, I was a stripper for a few years. That's how I started sex work. It wasn't for me. I met some incredible people and it was a job. But I didn't gel with it. I looked a little bit different, let's say, and I wasn't necessarily, I don't think I had the look.
What's the look?
Long hair, maybe light skin, super femme. I feel like I just wasn't, I feel like I'm more femme now than I was back then.
I think that can vary from club to club.
Yeah, I think it can. I also think I was just in this headspace of like, I had my rebellion stage a little bit later on, and I kind of was just like rejecting anything that would make me like fit in kind of thing. So,
okay.
Yeah, and then I started doing fetish wrestling straight after that, and I was like, oh, this is great. I feel comfortable here.
What is fetish wrestling?
So fetish wrestling is it's a kink, it's play, it's grappling with it's grappling with your partner, your play partner, and creating a kind of BDSM dom sub relationship within that space. Okay. And I'd already been doing. I'm a martial artist, so I was already doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for about 5 years before I started wrestling, kinky wrestling, fetish wrestling. So I was quite comfortable already in that space.
Mm-hmm. And how did you find out about fetish wrestling?
There was a guy at the club who kind of approached me because I was like, he was like, you look really strong. And I was like, no one's really complimented me for that before, like my calves in the club before. So I was like, okay. We had a private dance, and then he told me he was like, meet me at this place called the Submission Rooms, and we'll have a wrestle and see if you like it.
How did that first experience go?
Interestingly, if I look back on it, he was actually pretty rough. I mean, I was fine in it. It was so you have kind of, it's called fantasy, semi-competitive and competitive. It was like a full-on competitive session.
Oh, did he tell you that?
No, But you know how it is with like your first session in anything. You just
kind of
go in and you're like, have no fucking idea what's happening. And you're like, oh. And you just think it's normal because... but I also really enjoyed it. I really liked the feeling afterwards of kind of being like asserting myself in such a tactile way. I think that's why I enjoy domination through wrestling, is because of how tactile it is and really using my body's, like my physical strength.
Is there always a power dynamic?
Yes, but I think the way that's enacted can change. So depending on the personality of the person, it can be almost like vying for dominance sometimes, or sometimes...
Bratty.
Yeah. Well, yeah, bratty, but sometimes, I mean... I would say if they're a proper sub, like a real sub, it can be bratty, but I have had sessions before where it is like, I'm going to come and get you kind of thing. And that's interesting to experience.
But they don't really want that ultimately, or it is a fight.
Yeah, yes and no. There are, because I think that's also why different guys have like their favorite wrestlers, because we all bring a little something different to the table.
How would you say your style is?
So I'm very technical because of my background. So I'm very technical and I'm very safe. I know how to look after people. But because of that, I think maybe that's not everyone's thing. They like somebody who's a bit more kind of, they've learned to just scrap. You know, they've kind of learned on the way, very specifically kind of like fetish wrestling style, I would call it.
Like a scissor hold?
Yeah, which is all stuff that I do and I love. Yeah. But I think, I'm kind of known for being a very technical wrestler. That's my thing.
Okay.
I'm very dominant as well, so within that space.
So you're at the club, you have this guy who asks for a private dance, introduces you to fetish wrestling. You get the taste, you like it. How long has that been now? You're still wrestling?
Yeah, I am still wrestling. It's been years and years and years. It's one of those things where you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, that is...
Do you film anything for it? Did it progress into more traditional forms of domination?
Yeah, I do. I'd still say fetish wrestling is like my bread and butter, but I do more traditional forms of domination as well. Mm. And I think you kind of pick things up with any form of domination. You kind of pick things up that can be applied in other areas as well. Okay. Like in wrestling, there's a lot of impact play. There's a lot of breath play. You can kind of combine it with bondage, and it's like a whole, world.
It facilitates a lot already. Okay. And do you ever bring those aspects back into Sex and Rage at all? Do you have any wrestling things?
We do have a new wrestling event that has gone down a treat. It was a thing that everyone was kind of waiting for.
Lesbian wrestling?
Lesbian wrestling. Yeah, lesbian wrestling. It's interesting.
Is it fantasy? Semi-competitive? Competitive?
It's a bit of everything. Okay. It's a bit of everything.
Are there winners?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, we're all winners. We're all winners. It was really nice, actually. The last one, because you develop your persona. I mean, like any form of sex, you develop your persona. Okay. But that can look really different depending on what you're doing, I guess.
The audience?
The audience, your client. I think with persona, it's interesting because there's definitely like, I really think that, we don't exist in a vacuum. The persona is developed based on, a lot on how you're perceived, as well as your own internal feelings about yourself. So my wrestling persona is Sativa Mist, which is not Black Venus. Okay. But I've been Sativa Mist for so long. At one point, I was like, I don't feel like that person anymore. Okay.
How is Venus different to Sativa?
I actually would say she's probably a lot more sure of herself, and she probably has more boundaries. I think Sativa Mist will kind of like just wrestle anyone, fight anyone, very kind of playful, but She's not retired. She's still there. And I think because I've been Sativa for so long, a lot of the wrestling scene kind of like know me as Sativa. Okay.
So that's your professional wrestling name or fighting name? Okay. And you primarily wrestle because you do MMA fights also, right?
Yeah, I do Muay Thai.
Muay Thai.
And I do jiu-jitsu. I started jiu-jitsu when I was kind of in my mid-teens. And I grew up doing karate. So I'm a black belt in karate. So I have a black belt in karate, purple belt in jiu-jitsu. And I had my first professional Muay Thai fight a couple of months ago. And then I've had a little break over the last couple of months because life has been a bit nuts and I've needed some downtime.
Yeah. I feel like we did a self-defense workshop.
Yes, we did.
Together, maybe longer than 2 months ago, though.
Yes, it was a while back. Yeah, I think it was actually when I was training for my fight.
Yeah. And I've done one previously, but it was a lot less physical than the one you gave us.
I remember you saying it.
I was like, well, there are mats down.
Yeah. I started doing like most of my martial arts practice, I would say, is more kind of self-defense orientated. It's not necessarily about beating people up. It's about looking after yourself. So I think the practice is quite different, which is also those are the kind of workshops that I give for the community because I think it's more practical to kind of focus on the very fundamentals, the basics, especially because my jiu-jitsu teacher I'm very close to. We've known each other for that amount of time since I started. He's kind of like an uncle to me. Has always been he's an amazing teacher, and I've learned a lot from him about self-defense, not just about being the moment that you're defending yourself. It's also like the preparation and being aware of the things that could potentially happen to you. And then also after you've experienced, a violence, like how you then recover and continue to defend yourself from that. So it's not just one particular moment. It's a series of moments. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember we started with a bit of a meditation.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's usually the mind that goes first in high intense situations, I think.
Like people blank or people?
Yeah, it's flight.
Okay.
Or fight or freeze. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes things are made worse if you've not been able to put yourself in a particular situation. So that's why visualization is a really important part of martial arts and self-defense. It's being able to visualize yourself in positions of power and kind of overcoming obstacles and challenges. So yeah, that's something that I talk about a lot when I'm teaching or facilitating, is how we perceive ourselves in those situations can actually become our reality.
There seems to be a lot of community-minded things that are being created from things that are sex work adjacent. Were you thinking of creating things for the community, workshops, events, before you were in the sex industry, or is it something that sort of came about?
I think it came together because I was young when I started, and I was sort of finding myself at the time. I was finding myself through martial arts and sex work. I hadn't really... Wrestling was probably the first point where they sort of crossed over, because there's a difference between grappling an 80-kilo guy in the dojo to when you're grappling somebody alone in a studio, for work. It's quite different. But then it kind of brought it home to me, the feeling of like, oh, this isn't like necessarily a normal thing that people kind of are used to. And I was co-facilitating some workshops for a project that I was a part of called Shadow Sisters Fight Club. So we started facilitating workshops for the queer community, for women, for survivors. We did a workshop with Swarm, Sex Workers Advocacy and Rights Movement. And it was really striking for me because I realized something that I had normalized my whole life because I've trained with men since I was a kid, because both my parents did karate. So that was kind of the world that I grew up in, and we all trained together. I realized that that wasn't necessarily an experience that everybody had. So there's a lot of anxiety around being with men, I find, which I don't necessarily have because I've trained with them. But yeah, that's kind of something that feeds back into my practice, is how we can create spaces of, I think, just getting into the mindset of really thinking about the quality of our interactions with men, understanding like how that violence can be addressed. I feel like my understanding of assault might be a little, maybe not different per se to other people, because I still think that men need to really be held accountable. But at the same time, I do think we really need to kind of have spaces where we teach people how to defend themselves. I think it's really important. I think, in places like Japan or Korea, you learn martial arts from a very young age. And it's interesting that we don't have that culture here. I think there needs to be different things happening. We need to be making sure that men are accountable. And we also have to be realistic that things are going to change quite slowly. So how do we teach women and sexual minorities how to defend ourselves? So that's kind of like my approach with it.
What are the plans for those workshops? Do you hold them regularly, or?
Yeah, I was running workshops, self-defense workshops, for about 8 years. I've had a little bit of a hiatus, but I'm planning on starting some workshops myself, and then also assisting my jiu-jitsu teacher is going to be doing a class in Camden, and I'll assist with that.
Is that for?
That would be for community, and kind of anybody who wants to join and explore martial arts together.
Oh, okay. So it'll be more martial arts focus as opposed to self-defense.
It will be self-defense. It will be self-defense, but it will, those martial arts principles will really be kind of integrated into the, discipline and community as well. I think martial arts is ultimately about community.
Mm-hmm.
And, finding a family who you can train with and you can support each other in your growth.
Mm-hmm. So how long has it been since you've been practicing? Since you were 15?
No, karate I started when I was, I was a kid. I was a baby. I was like maybe like 5.
So most of your life?
Most of my life, yeah.
Okay, I like how that thread stayed with you.
Yeah, I've never not been able to train. I've had breaks.
Yeah.
But I've always come back to it.
What do you think that is?
I value it very highly. I think because it's something that keeps me connected to my childhood, for sure. But I've also seen so much value in it, like the discipline, the sense of community. Like you train with people, you sweat with people, you literally bleed with people. And it also does make you grateful for life.
Sounds kind of like sex work community.
Yeah, it is though. It really is. You really kind of like bond with the people that you train with. You bond with the people that you play with and
work with.
The people that you work with. So I really see a lot of similarities, and that's why a lot of martial artists I know or athletes, just quite simply athletes who do end up doing sex work, a lot of them end up finding wrestling or domination because the similarities are so clear.
What are the similarities to you?
You put yourself through a lot. It's like a dom. I think doms, like a good dom does respect a good sub, because the pain and the
devotion, the presence. There's a lot.
There's a lot of things that you can, in the same way with fighting or being an athlete, you have to respect people because everyone's putting in the work, everyone's trying to win, everyone's trying to be as good as they can be. You respect your opponent. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that I think those are some parallels that really run strong through.
And I cannot speak to fighting or for mixed martial arts, but at least within sex work, I kind of feel like you're operating in the most intimate of spaces with people, and you see quite extreme emotional states, and you have that commonality with other people who are working with other people's extreme emotional states, vulnerabilities at least. And on top of that, you're perceived by the world in a difficult to manage way. There's a lot of stereotypical expectations on who you are, and having to like live with that is also a very difficult experience.
Yeah, absolutely. You're kind of...
So it's very bonding.
It is, it is. And you are kind of, you're outside the mainstream.
Yeah.
And what you're saying about, seeing people's vulnerabilities. In a fight, if there's two people fighting each other, there's going to be a dominant person, ultimately, and a submissive person. And unless you've been in that space, it's
very triggering for people, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it is massively triggering.
I experience some people sometimes where they have a flashback or something. My voice might come out a certain way, and they'll mention that they're kind of scared of it, but it's just me having a deeper voice or something, right? And it just brings them this fear, and it's like something so small. Really?
But it can be like little things like that with people. And
because it's not practiced, I guess, whereas I get to practice it all the time, right? Yeah. So when somebody's in a fight and they're experiencing this extreme win or extreme loss, I guess then it becomes almost a more easy space to encounter in your day-to-day.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because I think a lot of fighters I know are actually quite sensitive people.
What do you mean sensitive?
I mean, like, actually very sensitive, very, very...
Take things personally?
No, we've had hard lives. We've had hard lives. I've had a lot of pushback, not necessarily... Yeah, things haven't been easy. I know that, growing up, I had quite a tough time. Had, I guess, quite a... it wasn't a terrible childhood by any means, but there were definitely some specific challenges that I experienced. And when you have two parents who are fighters, it's I guess it can be quite lonely sometimes, because they were competing at international level. So that was my childhood was often consumed with martial arts. And then, interracial family, there's a lot of things that come up sometimes, especially like around divorce and stuff, that are quite specific. But a lot of fighters I know, we dedicate a lot to fighting. And I would say that I'm not even on the more extreme end of that spectrum. Like, you really have to sacrifice everything. And I saw that with my parents. A lot was sacrificed in order to be a fighter. So because of that, you really feel that sacrifice. You don't go out. Your socializing is the gym, the dojo. You have to eat very specifically. You have to train, 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. You're tired all the time. So you're vulnerable, actually, and depleted for this 15 minutes of pure dominance that you hope to achieve.
Or submission. Or submission. You need to go through.
And then that's the whole other thing that you have to do. And the adrenaline after a fight is crazy. Like, it's my not the last fight, but the fight before. No, in fact, I think it was my first kind of semi-pro fight. I won, and then I left the ring and I started crying because I thought, oh, I fought terribly. It wasn't good enough, but I'd won.
Yeah.
Because
it's just a lot happening, I guess.
It's fucking draining. It's really like a lot on the senses. So
again, maybe a parallel to a session.
Yeah. It's like total like come down afterwards. And then you're like, you had these massive highs, and then you need the next thing to kind of satisfy yourself. You need this
the
goal.
Next hit.
Yeah. It's literally.
Yeah, I mean, I'm maybe 14, 15 years into the job now. So I have a little bit of a routine where I don't get burned out. But the first few years, managing going into space, like that headspace and controlling it and going through those emotions myself. Now I can go through the look of the emotion without necessarily going too deeply into it.
It's recognizing it first, isn't it? That's where you get burnt out, because you have to recognize it.
It's exciting also. You want to go through it.
It's great. And then you're like, oh, this is something that actually I have to manage.
Yeah, if I want to survive.
Yeah.
So how does that work in the fighting world then? Because that sounds like I as a worker, I can do my many sessions and like touch in and touch out. It doesn't have to be so present. I'm not going to get hurt, as much. So how do you manage that in a fighting context? I feel like you have to be present.
You have to be very present, but then being present doesn't necessarily mean you're in a good place.
Yeah.
Being present, I think, like if you're having, I think sometimes if you're going, I think when we talk about being present and we talk about like what's a healthy mind, sometimes it is just acknowledging that you're a bit depressed or you're not feeling 100%, and then learning how to manage that, as opposed to being like, berating yourself for not being happy all the fucking time. Like, it doesn't. Life is not like that. I think with fighters, it can be very lonely. It can be very lonely because the only other people who kind of really understand what you're going through is other fighters, like sex workers. The only other people who understand is other sex workers. I was speaking to a friend the other day about burnout, and it's so difficult because fighters sometimes don't know when they're next going to have a fight. You might have to pull out because you're injured. There are so many things that could happen. So it's hard to not have your sense of self-worth wrapped up in your work, whether that's fighting or fucking. How do we become our personas, and especially with fighters, like you have to be kind of almost braggadocious and very like bold. You have to be
Sativa.
Yeah. Like psych people out a little bit, but that might not necessarily be who you are.
Yeah.
You might actually just be very vulnerable and want to cuddle.
Can that get tiring?
Yeah.
And where does Venus sit in the persona worlds?
I think Venus is more. Venus has definitely observed these emotions and is aware of them, and practices taking more time for herself, and is less guilty. Like, I used to have a lot of guilt around training, or not training, to be specific. A lot of guilt around not putting enough energy into work if I felt like I was slacking off with work or not doing, because I've always done so much. Sometimes it feels like I'm doing nothing, even though I'm doing the most. It means that certain areas will suffer, but that's natural if you're kind of doing a lot of different, if you have like a lot of different streams of practice. So yeah, Venus is aware of that. She says.
Are you happy with the different modalities, the different parts?
Yeah, especially now. I think it's made me who I am. And it's also giving me a broader and more holistic view of life. Sometimes I find sometimes I find if you get too trapped into one aspect of yourself, you have a very particular worldview that becomes shaped by the people you have around you. And because I'm surrounded by such wildly different people, martial artists, my sex worker friends, my queer friends,
our clients,
exactly.
People I would never ever have anything to do with. Unless they applied.
But there's some, I've learned a lot from some of them.
Oh, absolutely.
For sure. Even
just relationally.
Exactly. Yeah.
How to get along.
Yeah, exactly. And how you, how I'm going to kind of relate to you, what you can learn from that. So, yeah. I having all of those different perspectives in my life I think has given me kind of holistic view of things.
It's a good place.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you hope for in the short term, the long term? For the fighting, for sex and rage, for the self-defense workshops, for your view on yourself?
Oh,
or you're just going with it?
Oh God, yeah, I think I need to stop going with it. I think
really seems to be working.
To a certain degree, I think there needs to be no. I'm always going to be someone who goes with the flow. I think that is who I am. But Sex and Rage has had a lot of really good press recently, which is really lovely to see because we have been going on for like 5 years now. I think sometimes people think we've kind of popped up overnight, but we've been really doing this for a while now. So it will be good to see the wrestling events take off, and we're doing a monthly event at Loosh in Soho, and which is the last Wednesday of every month. And we have some exciting things coming up with them kind of outside of that particular space as well. So that's really exciting. I'll go back to fighting soon. I want to get into stunts as well. That might be... She says she doesn't want to pick anything else up. I'm like, and also...
I mean, it's very adjacent.
It's adjacent. And I think it will suit me quite well because it's still performance-based.
Yeah. So what does stunts look like?
I have a few friends who do stunts, and they've kind of suggested maybe...
Are you jumping off of things? Are you in a fight?
I'll integrate the fighting. Yeah. I'll integrate the fighting.
So stunt fights.
Stunt fights, yeah.
I've heard that can be quite different because you have to stop yourself.
Yeah. And it's choreographed.
Yeah.
But I think what the fighting
You're a
gives...
dancer.
I'm a dancer as well. Choreography, give it to me. Is the feeling behind it.
Okay.
I think if you like, I know what it feels like to punch somebody, and I know what it feels like to get hit. So I reckon I'll be quite good at replicating.
What does it feel like to get hit?
Depends on what you're getting hit with, and with what. Are you getting elbowed in the back of the head? Are you getting hit in the face with 4-ounce gloves, or are they?
Let's say bare hands.
Bare hands. Well, I've not actually been... I would say I probably haven't been hit with bare hand. Actually, no, I take that back. So the last fight I did was with 4-ounce gloves, with the MMA gloves.
Okay.
But it was a Muay Thai fight. Getting hit with those is brutal. You can really feel your face. You're like, oh, I have a nose. I'm very aware of that. Because it provides different amounts of protection, obviously. Getting hit with... It kind of... It's like it feels like you're stunned, but then because you have to defend yourself, you're trying to get up kind of almost before you've hit the floor.
Okay.
Have you ever seen somebody get knocked out and you're kind of like...
My goodness.
They don't even realise that it's happened. So you constantly go back in as much as is possible.
Yeah.
It's my jiu-jitsu teacher said that to me once. Being in a ring or a cage is a very lonely place to be. You kind of block everything out.
Yeah, you have to, right?
You have to. So it's just you and your opponent, and it's...
I love all the similarities
primal.
This is bringing up in me to session. I'm like, oh wow, I didn't realize it was like a fight.
Yeah, it is. It's very primal, and there's the anxiety sometimes prior to it is the hardest bit, and then when you're in there, it goes so quickly. Time just passes.
So we have the new events for Sex and Rage. We have Getting Back to Fighting. We have the Stunts. That's probably a lot.
Yeah, I think it's quite a bit, isn't it?
Yeah. Are you going to take up any? Sometimes I see stunts people using props. So they're like a specialist with like a sword or something like that.
Yeah, my friend said that she's going to teach me some weapons. I do some nunchucks. So I've been like working on that for a year or two now.
Something else to add to domination sessions.
I do sometimes, actually. Yeah, they've definitely made an appearance.
Oh my God.
They've made an appearance.
I want to be invited to that session.
Yeah, we'll do a double with nunchucks.
Oh, so when is the next Sex and Rage?
So the next Sex and Rage, we have the next wrestling event will be on November the 1st. It'll be Halloween special, so we'll be dressing up.
Nice. Do you have your outfit?
I'm still deciding.
Okay. What are the options, or do you want to not share?
I'm really into the idea of being a gladiator.
Okay, yep.
So
lots of parts to rip off.
Lots of parts to rip. Yeah, bring some like weapons, like a
get your nunchucks out.
Yeah. But yeah, there's options. So I'll take some advice if you've got any.
Oh.
any suggestions?
I'll think about it. And is there anything else that you would like to mention?
Anything else
that I may have missed?
No, I think we've pretty much covered this half of the year. Yeah. There's stuff in the works, so
we'll see. Next episode.
Yeah. I've kind of been trying to do this thing where you speak things into existence, but you also have to like not get your hopes up. So sort of
interesting meeting of minds.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you
for bringing so much of your personal into community space. It's very, very helpful and useful.
Thank you.
And entertaining. And hot also, I mean, quite frankly. So
yeah, I'm definitely kind of bringing my own perversions, also my personal perversions.
Okay, we're going to sign off on your personal perversions. Share.
My personal perversions. I'm really into power play.
Okay.
I like seeing how that plays out with people. To be honest, I'm quite interested in like the psychology of people. That really turns me on a lot. Kind of figuring people out and having other people figure me out. And I'm quite I've learned that I'm quite perceptive over the years. So I'm quite good at picking up on subtle languages. And I find that very sexy when you kind of have this switch between people every time you meet them. So yeah, that's my...
Do you have a preferred power play?
Emotionally, psychologically.
Anything.
And like if we're speaking physically, I do enjoy tussling. I do enjoy kind of like really tactile.
A proper
throwing around
meeting.
Yeah, actually. Proper meeting. Yeah, like a passionate meeting. I'm very into the feeling somebody's energy and letting go. And I enjoy people who enjoy a lot of squirting because that's something that I'm into. So kind of a lot of...
You can bring that into wrestling, I guess.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Quite easily.
Yeah, it might make the Sex and Rage floor a little wet, but you can isolate that when you're wrestling, I guess.
Yeah, I think we might bring... we'll have some sheets for the next one. It's interesting because you kind of don't know... the guests kind of lead where the play goes.
Oh.
So we're kind of figuring out all together, I think, to see
whether it becomes more sexualized or more competitive.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
What are the perverts' feedback so far? Me being one of them.
Well, but this is the thing about like how, especially for the wrestling, how like at the end we were kind of offering like mini sessions to the guests, and I was kind of doing this dominant play with one of the guests, and I turn around and two people, not wrestlers, are like going for it with each other.
Oh.
And there's a little crowd.
It just got them going.
And it was super physical. I was like, wow, this is amazing. But this is what people want. I think people really want to feel strong.
Allowed to
Yeah.
Get tactile.
Yeah. Sometimes we lose touch with that. Especially, and it's a good thing. We're very concerned about consent and how that plays out in the physical, sexual, intimate space. It's also, if we can have that and also express like the full limits of our strength and our power, that together is really sexy because you can feel strong and embodied and grounded in yourself and full, but also, we're in that in a consensual dynamic. So.
Yeah, I think that's probably already a lot in terms of what the wrestling event can facilitate and can mean.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't necessarily need to be more than that. Like just the meeting of bodies in a freer form.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll see what the crowd screams for.
What they want. We're going to give them what they want.
Yeah. No, thank you.
See you there.
Yeah. Thank you for giving us what we want and for coming on today also.
You're welcome.
And I guess there'll be more with all of your many things to come. So thank you also, and speak to you next.